My grandma told me to find you before the snow comes. The little girl's voice was so small it should have disappeared beneath the crystal chandeliers, the string quartet, and the soft thunder of wealthy people applauding themselves. But somehow it cut clean through the ballroom of the Hartwell Foundation Gala and left the richest man in New York standing perfectly still. William Hartwell had been halfway through accepting a humanitarian award, one hand resting on the glass podium, his polished black shoes planted on a stage built above a sea of tuxedos, silk gowns, and white roses. Cameras blinked from the back of the room. Champagne glasses paused inches from painted lips. A senator near the front row stopped smiling. And there, at the edge of the aisle, stood a black girl no older than 8, wearing a navy coat too thin for December, 2 neat braids tied with faded yellow ribbons, and a brown canvas bag clutched against her chest like it held the last warm thing in the world. William stared at her, not angry at first, not even confused, but struck by something deeper and colder, because the words she had spoken did not belong in that room. They belonged to a porch in Georgia 30 years ago, to a woman with a quiet laugh, to a promise he had buried beneath skyscrapers, mergers, and the kind of success that makes a man forget which memories still have teeth. The host tried to laugh, gently, nervously. Security moved from the side doors. The music faded into a trembling silence. "Sweetheart," a woman in pearls whispered from the nearest table, "you can't be here." But the girl did not look at her. She looked only at William. Her chin lifted a little, not with pride exactly, but with the kind of courage children find when they have already run out of every safer choice. "She said your name was William Hartwell," the girl said. "She said you would pretend not to know at first, but she told me to wait until you heard her name." William's fingers tightened around the edge of the podium. Somewhere in the ballroom, a camera shutter clicked once, then stopped. "What name?" he asked, though his voice barely sounded like his own. The girl swallowed. Her hand slipped into the canvas bag, and for one breath, 2 breaths, the whole room seemed to lean toward her. "Ruth Brooks," she said. The color drained from William's face so quickly that the woman beside him reached for his arm. Ruth Brooks. The name moved through him like a door being kicked open in a house he had abandoned. He saw a kitchen window glowing amber at dusk. He heard gospel music playing low from an old radio. He remembered a woman standing with flour on her hands, telling him that real men did not run from truth just because truth was inconvenient. He had not heard that name in 28 years. He had made sure of it. Or maybe he had only made sure he never had to answer why it still hurt. "Who are you?" William asked. The girl stepped forward, and the security guard closest to her lifted a hand, but William raised his palm without looking away. The guard froze. The girl's shoes made soft, careful sounds against the marble floor. They were clean but worn at the toes, and one lace had been tied in a knot so many times it looked almost permanent. When she reached the bottom of the stage, she looked much smaller beneath the chandelier light, yet her eyes did not move away from his. "My name is Maya Brooks," she said. "Grandma Ruth said if anything happened to her, I had to bring you the bag myself. Not mail it. Not give it to your office. To you." A murmur moved across the gala, expensive and uneasy. William heard none of it clearly. He descended the 3 steps from the stage, slow at first, then almost unsteady. Up close, he saw that Maya's braids had been carefully done by someone whose hands had loved her. He saw a tiny silver bracelet around her wrist, dulled with age, tucked half beneath her sleeve. He saw the canvas bag, patched at one corner with blue thread. He recognized the stitching before he allowed himself to recognize why. "Where is Ruth?" he asked. Maya's eyes softened, and for the first time, the courage in her face flickered. "She passed last Thursday," she said. She waited as long as she could. The words landed without drama, without accusation, and that made them worse. William looked away for half a second toward the massive banner. Behind him with his own name printed in gold letters. Hartwell Foundation Annual Gala for Children and Families. The irony was so sharp he almost laughed, but no sound came. He had donated millions to children whose names he never learned. He had built centers, funded scholarships, sat on boards, and smiled for photographs. Yet a child connected to the one woman who had once known the poorest, truest version of him had crossed the city in winter to find him because no assistant, no lawyer, no foundation had been enough. "Mr. Hartwell," the host said carefully, "perhaps we should handle this privately." Before William could answer, a tall woman in a white evening suit stepped from the front row. Victoria Hartwell, his younger sister, moved with the calm authority of someone used to cleaning family messes before cameras caught them. Her smile was perfect, but her eyes were fixed on the bag in Maya's hands. "William," she said softly, "this child is clearly confused. We can have someone from the foundation help her." Maya hugged the bag tighter. "I'm not confused." Victoria's smile did not change. "Of course not, dear. But people sometimes tell children stories they don't understand." Maya reached into the bag and pulled out a yellowed envelope sealed with tape, the paper bent from being carried close. Written across the front, in blue ink faded by years, were 4 words: "For William, when ready." William stopped breathing. He knew that handwriting. Not Ruth's. Someone else's. A hand that had once written his name on the back of a photograph and tucked it into his college jacket the night he said he would come back. Elena Brooks. The room blurred at the edges. Victoria's face changed for only a second, but Maya saw it. So did William. The mask cracked, then returned too fast. "Give that to me," Victoria said, still gentle, but sharper now. Maya took one step back. Grandma said no. William looked from the envelope to his sister, then back to the child. The silence around them had grown heavy enough to press against the glass walls. Outside, beyond the hotel windows, Manhattan glittered in the cold, and the first thin flakes of snow began to fall through the dark. Like pieces of a memory finally coming home. William lowered himself to one knee so he would not tower over Maya. The ballroom seemed to inhale. "Maya," he said, his voice rough and quiet, "what exactly did your grandmother tell you about me?" The girl studied him for a long moment, as if measuring whether the man in front of her was the one Ruth had described or only the shadow money had made of him. Then she opened the canvas bag wider and revealed the corner of an old photograph, a silver locket, and a stack of letters tied with a faded yellow ribbon. "She said you lost someone," Maya whispered. "But she said maybe you didn't know she was taken from you." William's eyes dropped to the letters. His hand trembled before it touched them. Behind him, Victoria whispered his name like a warning, but for the first time in decades, he did not turn toward his sister's voice. He looked only at the child Ruth had sent through the cold, holding the past in a canvas bag, and he understood with a terror that hollowed out his chest that this gala, this award, this perfect room full of applause, had ended the moment Maya Brooks walked in. Something older than his fortune had found him. Something he had failed to protect was still alive enough to speak. The snowfall beyond the ballroom windows thickened into a silver curtain, softening the lights of Manhattan until the city looked distant and unreal. But inside the hotel, every eye remained fixed on Maya Brooks and the worn canvas bag resting in her small hands. William Hartwell stayed on one knee longer than anyone expected. The billionaire who controlled companies, foundations, and boardrooms across the country suddenly looked like a man standing at the edge of a memory he was afraid to enter. The letters tied with the faded yellow ribbon seemed to pull at him more strongly than any business deal ever had. Victoria took a measured step forward. "William," she said quietly, "this is neither the time nor the place." Her voice sounded calm, but Maya noticed the way her fingers tightened around the silver clutch she carried. William noticed it too. For years he had trusted his sister's instincts without question. Tonight, for the first time, something felt different. "How did your grandmother know where to find me?" he asked Maya. The girl glanced down at the letters before looking back at him. "She always knew where you were." A murmur moved through the crowd again. Maya continued. "She kept newspaper clippings, magazine articles, pictures from interviews. Every birthday she would look at them and say she hoped you were happy." William lowered his eyes. The words landed harder than he expected. Ruth Brooks had every reason to forget him, yet she had not. "Did she ever talk about me?" he asked. Maya nodded. "Not every day. Only when she sat on the porch after dinner." Her expression softened. "She said there was once a young man who wanted to fix everything. She said he laughed too loud when he was nervous and drank too much sweet tea." A few people near the stage smiled awkwardly. William did not. He felt his throat tighten. Those details belonged to a version of himself that had disappeared decades ago. Victoria interrupted gently. "Children remember stories differently. We should not assume anything." Maya turned toward her. "Grandma told me not everyone would want the truth." The ballroom became even quieter. Victoria's smile remained in place, but her eyes hardened for a fraction of a second. William stood slowly and offered Maya his hand. "Come with me." Gasps rippled through the room. Reporters near the back instantly reached for their phones. Victoria stepped forward. "William, think carefully." He looked at her. "That is exactly what I am finally doing." Without another word, he guided Maya away from the stage. The crowd parted as they crossed the ballroom. Crystal chandeliers reflected across polished marble floors while whispers followed them like shadows. Maya walked calmly beside him, her small shoes making quiet sounds against the stone. She did not look overwhelmed. She looked determined. They entered a private conference room overlooking Central Park. The noise of the gala faded the moment the doors closed. Only William, Maya, and Victoria remained inside. A fireplace flickered softly against one wall. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then William pointed toward a leather chair. "You can sit if you want." Maya shook her head. Grandma said important conversations are easier standing up. Despite everything, William almost smiled. That sounded exactly like Ruth. Victoria crossed her arms. "Enough mystery. Ask the child what she wants." Maya looked genuinely confused. "What do you mean?" "Money," Victoria said. "Most people come looking for William because they want something." Maya stared at her for a moment. Then she carefully placed the canvas bag on the conference table and pushed it toward William. "If I wanted money, I would not be giving these away." The simplicity of her answer filled the room. William reached for the bag. His fingers hesitated above the worn fabric. Suddenly, he realized he was afraid. Not afraid of scandal. Not afraid of reporters. Afraid of opening a door that could change everything he believed about the last 30 years of his life. Maya noticed. "Grandma said you would be scared." William looked up sharply. "She said that?" Maya nodded. "She said sometimes people think the truth is going to hurt them, but really it hurts because they waited too long to hear it." Victoria exhaled sharply and looked toward the windows. William stared at the child standing across from him. She was only 8 years old, yet she carried herself with the calm certainty of someone fulfilling a promise larger than herself. Slowly, he untied the faded yellow ribbon holding the letters together. The paper beneath looked fragile with age. On top rested a single envelope. His name was written across the front in handwriting he would have recognized anywhere. The room seemed to shrink around him. His pulse echoed in his ears. Elena. For nearly 3 decades he had believed her silence was a choice. Now, as snow drifted across the dark city outside, he found himself wondering whether every year of that silence had been a lie. William stared at the envelope for so long that the crackling fire became the only sound in the room. The handwriting on the front carried him backward through decades he had spent trying not to revisit. Elena had written his name exactly the same way she always had, the W slightly tilted, the final letters trailing gently to the right as though she had been smiling while writing them. His thumb brushed the edge of the paper. It felt fragile, like something that had survived years simply because it refused to disappear. Maya remained quiet. Ruth had taught her that some truths needed space before they could breathe. Victoria, however, was losing patience. "William," she said carefully, "you do not even know when that letter was written." He ignored her. Slowly, he opened the envelope. Inside was a single folded page. The paper had yellowed with age, but the ink remained clear. His eyes moved across the first line, and immediately his chest tightened. "Dear William, if you are reading this, then fate finally succeeded where I failed." The room seemed to tilt. He continued reading. Elena wrote about a rainy afternoon in Savannah. She wrote about the diner where they used to share peach pie after class. She wrote about the dreams they once made together before life pulled them onto different roads. There was no anger in the letter, no accusation, only sadness and hope. William swallowed hard. "What does it say?" Maya asked softly. For a moment he could not answer. Then he lowered the paper. "She wrote this 27 years ago." Victoria crossed her arms. "That proves nothing." William looked at her. "It proves she tried to reach me." He returned to the letter. Elena explained that after William left for New York, she had written repeatedly. She had sent letters, photographs, and updates about her life. None had ever received a reply. At first she thought he was busy. Later she believed he had changed his mind about their future. Finally she stopped writing, not because she stopped caring, but because silence had convinced her she was no longer welcome. William felt something heavy settle in his stomach. He remembered waiting for letters that never came. He remembered wondering why Elena had disappeared. He remembered convincing himself that moving forward was easier than searching for answers. Across the table, Victoria shifted her gaze toward the windows. Maya noticed. So did William. Then another page slipped from the envelope. It was a photograph. His breath caught instantly. A younger Elena stood beside Ruth on a small porch. Both women were smiling. In Elena's arms rested a baby wrapped in a pale blanket. William's hand trembled. "Who was that?" Maya asked. He could not speak immediately. His eyes remained locked on the image. The baby looked only a few months old. Elena's smile carried a happiness he had not seen in years. On the back of the photograph, written in the same familiar handwriting, were 6 words. "Her name is Grace Hartwell Brooks." William felt the air leave his lungs. Grace. The name echoed through his mind. Victoria stepped forward suddenly. "This is ridiculous." The sharpness in her voice startled even herself. Anyone could write a name on the back of a photograph. William slowly lifted his eyes toward his sister. "Do you know something about this?" For the first time that evening, Victoria hesitated. Only for a second, but it was enough. Maya watched carefully. Ruth had always said that people revealed themselves most clearly when they thought nobody was paying attention. "No," Victoria replied. "I am saying we should be rational." William looked back at the photograph. Grace Hartwell Brooks. The surname struck him harder than anything else. Elena had not erased him from the child's identity. Even after all those years, she had included his name. That realization hurt more than blame ever could. Maya reached into the canvas bag again. "There is more." She carefully removed a small silver locket. The metal had faded with time, but the engraving remained visible. William's eyes widened immediately. He knew the locket. He had purchased it from a tiny jewelry shop during his senior year of college. He had spent nearly an entire week's paycheck on it because Elena loved old-fashioned things. "I gave this to her," he whispered. Maya nodded. "Grandma said you would recognize it." William opened the locket with shaking fingers. Inside were 2 tiny photographs. On one side stood a young William and Elena beneath an oak tree. On the other side was the same baby from the photograph. Grace. The room fell silent again. Snow drifted against the tall windows. The city lights shimmered below like distant stars. William suddenly understood that Maya had not arrived carrying a story. She had arrived carrying evidence. Every item in the canvas bag connected to a past he had believed was lost forever. Every piece pushed him closer to a truth he was not yet ready to fully understand. Then Maya spoke the words that changed everything once more. "Grandma said the letters were only the beginning." William slowly looked up. "What do you mean?" Maya's expression became serious. "She said there is another reason she sent me here." The fire crackled softly behind them. Victoria went completely still. And for the first time that night, William realized his sister looked less worried about the past than she did about what might be revealed next. William remained motionless as the birth certificate rested on the conference table between them. The paper seemed impossibly small compared to the weight it carried. Outside, snow continued drifting across Central Park, covering the city in white silence, while inside the room decades of unanswered questions pressed against the walls. Victoria finally broke the silence. "That document does not prove what you think it proves." Her voice was steady, but not as steady as before. William slowly looked up. "Then tell me what it proves." Victoria hesitated. For years, she had always possessed an answer. Tonight, every answer seemed harder to find. "It proves that Ruth believed a certain version of events," she said. Nothing more. Maya watched the exchange quietly. Her grandmother had often said that truth rarely arrived all at once. It arrived in pieces, and people revealed themselves by which pieces they feared most. William closed the journal and leaned both hands against the table. "You visited Ruth." "Yes." "You never told me." Victoria folded her arms. "Because it was irrelevant." Elena was never irrelevant. The words escaped before he could stop them. The room fell silent again. For a moment, William was no longer standing in a luxury hotel overlooking Manhattan. He was 24 years old, standing beneath a Georgia oak tree, listening to Elena laugh at something completely unimportant. The memory hit him so suddenly that he had to look away. Maya noticed the change in his expression. "You still miss her?" William gave a faint, sad smile. "Some people never really leave." Maya nodded as if she already understood. Then she reached into the canvas bag one more time. Victoria immediately tensed. William noticed. "What is it?" Maya carefully removed a small rectangular box wrapped in blue fabric. The cloth looked old, but clean. She placed it on the table. Grandma said this was the most important thing. Victoria's face lost color. It happened so quickly that even she could not hide it. William stared at his sister. You know what that is. It was not a question. Victoria said nothing. Maya slowly unwrapped the cloth. Inside sat an old cassette tape and a handwritten note attached to it. William picked up the note. The handwriting belonged to Ruth. If William ever finds the courage to listen, let him hear this himself. William felt his pulse quicken. A recording? Maya nodded. Grandma kept it for years. Victoria stepped forward. This is ridiculous. Nobody even knows what is on that tape. You do, William said quietly. Victoria froze. The silence answered for her. William looked toward the media cabinet built into the conference room wall. As chairman of the foundation, he often used the room for presentations. Old and new equipment were stored there. After a brief search, he found a cassette player. The machine looked outdated compared to everything else around it, but it still worked. Maya stood perfectly still as William inserted the tape. The soft click echoed through the room. Then came static. A few seconds passed. Suddenly, an older woman's voice filled the room. Ruth Brooks. Even after all these years, her voice carried warmth. William closed his eyes. If you are hearing this, William, then something finally happened that I prayed for every year. The room seemed to stop breathing. Ruth continued. I am making this recording because memories fade, but truth should not. William gripped the edge of the table. Maya listened quietly. Victoria looked toward the windows. Ruth explained how Elena had written letter after letter, how she had waited, how she never stopped, believing William deserved to know. Then came the part that changed everything. One afternoon, Ruth said on the recording, a woman came to my house. She introduced herself as Victoria Hartwell. William's eyes opened instantly. Victoria lowered her head. Ruth continued speaking through the speakers. She told Elena that William had moved on. She said contact would only damage his future. She said powerful families protect their own. William slowly turned toward his sister. Tell me that is not true. Victoria remained silent. The recording continued. Elena cried after she left. Not because she stopped loving William. Because she believed he no longer loved her. The words landed like stones. William felt something inside him break. Not anger. Regret. Years and years of regret. The tape continued playing. Ruth described Elena's determination to raise Grace with dignity. She described birthdays, school plays, and family photographs carefully saved in boxes. Then came another revelation. Grace spent years asking about her father, Ruth said. And every year Elena answered the same way. She said he was a good man who simply did not know. Tears filled William's eyes. He looked away, unable to speak. Maya quietly reached into the canvas bag and removed a photograph he had not seen before. It showed a teenage girl smiling beside Elena. The resemblance was unmistakable. Grace. Older now. Confident. Kind. Real. William stared at the photograph while the final seconds of the recording played. Ruth's voice softened. If you are hearing this, then Maya found you. Trust her. She came because there is still one more truth you have not learned. The tape clicked to an end. Silence returned. Snow drifted against the glass. The city lights shimmered below. William looked at Maya, then at the photograph, then at Victoria. What truth? He whispered. Maya swallowed. Her eyes filled with sadness. The truth about what happened to Grace. The question lingered in the room long after the words left Maya's mouth. William stared at the photograph of Grace while snow continued falling beyond the glass. He had spent years imagining possibilities he never dared investigate, but none of those possibilities had prepared him for the reality now sitting in front of him. Maya looked down at the canvas bag before speaking. My mom was Grace. The confession was quiet, yet it seemed to echo through every corner of the conference room. William slowly lifted his eyes. For a moment, he could not process what he had heard. He looked at the teenage girl in the photograph and then back at Maya. The shape of her smile. The determination in her eyes. Suddenly, he saw traces of both Elena and himself. His chest tightened. Grace was your mother? Maya nodded. Yes, sir. The room fell silent again. Victoria remained near the windows, saying nothing. Maya continued carefully. Grandma told me not to be angry when I met you. William felt the words strike deeper than any accusation could have. Why would she say that? Maya glanced toward the photograph. Because Mom was never angry either. William lowered himself into a chair. The weight of the evening had become almost unbearable. Tell me about her. Maya smiled faintly. It was the first genuine smile he had seen from her since she arrived. She loved music. She always sang while making breakfast. She loved old books too. Grandma said I got that from her. William listened without interrupting. Every detail felt precious. Every sentence represented years he had lost. Maya continued. She used to tell me stories about a man in New York who helped people. William looked down. She talked about me? All the time. Maya's answer came without hesitation. When I was little, I thought you were a character from one of her books. William laughed softly through the emotion gathering in his throat. Then Maya's smile faded. But Mom got sick 3 years ago. The room became still. William immediately understood that the story was turning toward pain. Maya's voice remained steady. Ruth had taught her to speak honestly. She tried very hard to get better. She never stopped smiling around me. But after a while she could not work anymore. William closed his eyes briefly. He already knew where the story was heading, and yet hearing it felt impossible. She passed away? Maya nodded. 2 years ago. The words settled heavily between them. William looked at the photograph again. The daughter he had never known. The years he could never recover. The birthdays he missed. The graduations he never attended. The conversations that would never happen. Maya reached into the bag once more and removed a folded piece of paper. Mom left this for me before she died. William accepted it carefully. The paper was worn from being opened many times. He unfolded it and immediately recognized Grace's handwriting. Dear Maya, if Grandma ever sends you to New York, do not go looking for money. Go looking for truth. William swallowed hard and continued reading. Grace explained that she never blamed him. She explained that Elena and Ruth had always believed he simply did not know. The letter ended with a request. If you ever meet him, give him a chance to know who he really is. William lowered the page. His vision blurred. Across the room, even Victoria seemed unable to look directly at him anymore. Why did Ruth wait until now? He asked quietly. Maya looked toward the falling snow. Because she promised Mom she would protect me until she could not anymore. William frowned. What do you mean? Maya hesitated. Then she answered with heartbreaking honesty. Grandma got sick too. The room grew silent once more. Before she passed away, she told me there was only one person left who deserved the truth. William felt tears gather in his eyes. He had spent decades building an empire. He had acquired companies, buildings, awards, and influence. Yet an 8-year-old girl carrying a canvas bag had just handed him something far more valuable than any of it. A family he never knew existed. A daughter who never stopped believing in him. And a granddaughter standing only a few feet away. Then Maya reached into her coat pocket and carefully removed a small key attached to a faded yellow ribbon. She placed it on the table. There is one more thing. William stared at the key. What is it? Maya looked directly into his eyes. Grandma said it opens a box that explains everything. For the first time since the evening began, even Victoria appeared genuinely frightened. And William suddenly realized that the deepest secret Ruth Brooks had protected all these years might still be waiting to be discovered. The small brass key seemed ordinary at first glance, yet nobody in the room treated it that way. It rested on the polished conference table beneath the glow of the fireplace, attached to a faded yellow ribbon that had clearly survived many years. William picked it up carefully. The metal felt cold in his palm. Where is the box? He asked. Maya shook her head. Grandma never told me exactly. She only said you would know where to look once you understood the story. William studied the key again. Something about it felt familiar. Not the key itself, but the ribbon. He had seen that color before. Somewhere deep in a memory he had not visited in decades. Victoria suddenly stepped forward. This has gone far enough. Her voice was sharper than before. William, you are allowing an emotional evening to cloud your judgment. William slowly turned toward her. A few hours ago I thought I knew my own life. His eyes settled on hers. Now I am learning that my daughter existed, my granddaughter is standing in front of me, and you visited Ruth without ever telling me. Victoria looked away. I was trying to protect you. From what? William asked quietly. From the truth. The question lingered unanswered. Maya remained silent. She had learned something important during the journey to New York. Adults often revealed more during silence than during arguments. William placed the key on the table and looked back toward the photograph of Grace. He could not stop staring at it. Every few seconds his eyes returned to the image. How old was she in this picture, he asked. 17, Maya answered. Grandma said it was taken after she won a scholarship. William smiled sadly. She looks proud. Maya nodded. She worked very hard. The little girl hesitated. Mom wanted to become a teacher. William closed his eyes for a moment. Another piece of a life he had never known. Another dream he had never been there to encourage. The feeling inside his chest grew heavier. Not because Grace had been absent from his life, but because she had lived such a full life without ever knowing why he was absent from hers. Then something suddenly clicked in his memory. William opened his eyes. The ribbon. Maya looked up. What about it? William reached for the yellow ribbon attached to the key. Elena used to tie yellow ribbons around everything important. His voice softened. Books. Letters. Gifts. Maya smiled. Grandma did the same thing. William stared into the fire. Then another memory surfaced. A small wooden cabin outside Savannah. An old property that belonged to Ruth's family. Elena loved visiting it during the summers. His pulse quickened. The lake house. Maya tilted her head. What lake house? William stood so quickly that his chair rolled backward several inches. Ruth's family had a cabin near Lake Hartwell. Victoria immediately stiffened. William noticed. You know about it. William, you know about it. Victoria lowered her gaze. The answer was obvious. Maya watched both adults carefully. William moved toward the window. Snow continued falling over Manhattan, but his mind was hundreds of miles away in Georgia. He remembered Elena sitting on the dock with a notebook in her lap. He remembered Ruth making lemonade. He remembered a storage chest inside the cabin. An old cedar chest with a brass lock. His breath caught. The box. Maya's eyes widened. You know where it is? William nodded slowly. I think I do. For the first time that evening, excitement mixed with the grief and regret. If Ruth had hidden something there, it had remained untouched for decades. Victoria looked genuinely nervous now. The cabin may not even exist anymore. It exists, William replied. I kept paying the property taxes after Ruth left. Victoria blinked in surprise. You did? William gave a faint smile. I never admitted it to anyone. Maya looked at him curiously. Why? William stared at the key in his hand. Because some part of me never stopped hoping. The room fell quiet again. Outside, snow drifted against the glass. Inside, a path forward had finally appeared. Maya walked closer to William. Grandma said there would come a moment when everything started moving again. William looked down at her. What else did she say? Maya smiled softly. She said when you found the key, you would stop looking backward and start looking for answers. William nodded. For the first time all night, he felt certain about something. The story was not ending. It was only beginning. And somewhere in a forgotten cabin beside a quiet Georgia lake, a locked box had been waiting years for this exact moment. Less than 2 hours later, the lights of Manhattan faded behind them as William's private jet climbed into the winter sky. Maya sat beside the window, watching clouds drift beneath the wing while the canvas bag rested safely on her lap. Across from her, William stared at the small brass key turning slowly between his fingers. Neither of them spoke much during the flight. There were too many thoughts and not enough words. Victoria had remained behind in New York. Her final expression before they left lingered in William's mind. It had not been anger. It had been fear. The realization unsettled him. If the box contained what Ruth believed it contained, then someone had spent decades hoping it would never be opened. 3 hours later, a black SUV rolled down a quiet Georgia road lined with bare winter trees. The sky above was still dark, though the first hints of dawn touched the horizon. Maya pressed her forehead lightly against the window. It is beautiful here, she whispered. William followed her gaze. The countryside looked almost unchanged from the last time he had visited. Small fences, open fields, long stretches of road without traffic. It felt like another world compared to New York. Your grandmother loved this place, he said. Maya smiled softly. She always talked about the lake. As they rounded a final bend, the cabin appeared. It stood beside the water exactly as William remembered. The wooden walls showed their age. The porch leaned slightly. The dock extended into the still lake beyond. Yet somehow the entire property felt alive, as if it had been waiting patiently through the years. Maya stepped out of the vehicle first. Cold morning air filled her lungs. The lake reflected the pale colors of sunrise. William stood beside her, silent. Memories rushed toward him from every direction. Elena, reading books on the porch swing. Ruth watering flowers beside the steps. Summer evenings filled with laughter. For a moment, he felt 24 years old again. They climbed the wooden steps together. The front door opened with surprising ease. Dust floated through beams of golden morning light. Furniture remained covered with white sheets. An old clock rested above the fireplace. Everything felt frozen in time. Maya walked carefully through the living room. Grandma never sold it. William shook his head. No, why? He looked around the cabin. Because I could never bring myself to let it go. Maya nodded as though she understood completely. Then William's eyes settled on a corner of the room. A cedar chest sat exactly where memory said it would. His heartbeat quickened. There. Maya followed him across the room. The chest was old but well preserved. Brass fittings lined the edges. A small lock rested at the front. William held up the key. For a second, neither of them moved. Then Maya placed her hand gently over his. Grandma said some doors only open when people are ready. William smiled sadly. I hope she was right. Slowly, he inserted the key into the lock. The mechanism clicked immediately. The sound echoed through the quiet cabin. William lifted the lid. Inside rested dozens of carefully organized items. Letters tied with yellow ribbons. Photo albums. School certificates. Newspaper clippings. Drawings. Birthday cards. Entire decades of family history preserved inside a single chest. Maya gasped softly. William stared in disbelief. Ruth had not saved a few memories. She had saved everything. On top lay a sealed envelope addressed simply to William. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was another letter from Ruth. If you are reading this, she wrote. Then Maya completed her promise. Everything in this chest belongs to both of you. The years cannot be returned, but the truth can still be shared. William lowered the page. Tears filled his eyes. Then Maya reached toward one of the albums. She opened it carefully. Photographs filled every page. Grace as a child. Grace riding a bicycle. Grace holding school awards. Grace standing beside Elena. Grace smiling beside Ruth. Page after page revealed moments William had never seen. Yet one photograph stopped both of them cold. It showed a teenage Grace standing beside a young Maya. The resemblance between mother and daughter was unmistakable. William touched the image gently. She had your smile. Maya looked at the photograph and smiled through gathering tears. Everyone always said that. As they turned another page, something slipped free and fell onto the floor. William bent down and picked it up. It was a legal document. His expression changed instantly. Maya noticed. What is it? William stared at the paper. The document had been signed years earlier. It contained sworn statements, addresses, dates, and records. More importantly, it contained proof that several letters sent by Elena had been intercepted before ever reaching him. William's pulse pounded in his ears. The evidence was undeniable. Ruth had preserved everything. Every receipt. Every copy. Every detail. Maya watched his face carefully. Is it important? William slowly looked up. The morning sunlight illuminated the room around them. Yes, he said quietly. Because this proves your grandmother was telling the truth all along. The document remained in William's hands long after he finished reading it. Morning sunlight spilled through the cabin windows, illuminating the dust floating gently in the air. For years he had lived with uncertainty. Now certainty sat before him in black ink and dated signatures. Elena had written. Ruth had preserved proof. The letters had never reached him. The truth had not been lost. It had been diverted. Maya sat quietly beside the cedar chest, watching him. She did not interrupt. She had learned from Ruth that some discoveries required silence. William lowered the papers and looked around the cabin. Every photograph, every ribbon, every journal entry seemed to carry the same message. Elena had never stopped believing he deserved to know. Grace had never stopped believing he was a good man. Ruth had never stopped believing the truth would eventually find its way home. The realization overwhelmed him. He sat down heavily in the old wooden chair near the fireplace and covered his eyes. For several moments the cabin was completely silent except for the distant sound of water touching the dock outside. Maya slowly walked over and stood beside him. Grandma used to say something when she missed people, she said softly. William lowered his hands. What did she say? Maya smiled gently. She said love does not disappear just because time gets lost. The words settled deep inside him. He looked at the little girl standing beside him and suddenly understood something that had taken him decades to learn. Success could build towers, It could buy companies. It could place a person's name on buildings across the country. But none of those things could replace a single missed conversation with someone you loved. William looked back toward the photographs. I should have searched harder. Maya shook her head. Mom never wanted you to blame yourself. He looked surprised. Maya reached into the cedar chest and pulled out one final envelope. Unlike the others, it was addressed to no one. On the front, Grace had written only 2 words. Open last. William carefully unfolded the letter. The handwriting was graceful and familiar. If you are reading this, Grace wrote, then Maya found you. First, thank you for listening to her. Second, please stop punishing yourself. William swallowed hard and continued reading. Grace explained that she had spent years wondering about her father, but she never grew up feeling abandoned. Elena and Ruth had made sure of that. They spoke of him with kindness. They told stories about his generosity, his determination, and the dreams he once shared. Grace wrote that understanding changed her life. Instead of growing bitter, she grew curious. Instead of carrying anger, she carried hope. William's vision blurred as he read. Then came the final lines. Maya is the best thing that ever happened to me. If she reaches you, then life has given both of you a second chance. Do not waste it. William lowered the letter slowly. The room seemed brighter than before. Outside, sunlight shimmered across the lake. Maya sat beside him on the worn sofa. Neither of them spoke for a while. Finally, William looked at her. Really looked at her. Not as the messenger who had arrived at a gala carrying answers. Not as the child who had uncovered a family secret. But as his granddaughter. The last living connection to Elena, Grace, and Ruth. Maya, he said quietly. There is something I should have said a long time ago, even if I did not know who I was saying it to. She looked up. William's eyes filled with emotion. I am sorry I was not there. Maya studied his face carefully. Then she smiled. It was the same smile from the photograph. The same smile Grace carried years earlier. You are here now. William laughed softly through tears. Such a simple sentence. Yet it carried more grace than he felt he deserved. Hours later, as they prepared to leave the cabin, Maya paused beside the cedar chest. What happens next? She asked. William looked around the room one final time. The cabin no longer felt like a place of loss. It felt like a place where truth had finally been allowed to breathe. He picked up the box of photographs and letters. Next, he said, we tell the story the right way. Maya nodded. Together they stepped onto the porch. The lake stretched before them, calm and shining beneath the afternoon sun. The years that had been stolen could never be returned. Elena would not walk through the door. Grace would not sit beside them at dinner. Ruth would never see the promise she protected finally fulfilled. Yet somehow none of them felt absent. Their voices lived in the letters. Their love lived in Maya. And their truth had finally reached the man it was meant for. As William and Maya walked toward the waiting vehicle, he felt her small hand slip into his. This time he did not let go. For the first time in many years, the future no longer felt empty. It felt like a gift. And somewhere beyond the water, beyond the years, beyond every misunderstanding that had once separated them, a family that had been broken by silence had finally found its way home.